The Great Hall of the Zephyrian Collective had not seen such activity in 3,000 years. 12 different alien species gathered around the massive circular table, their various forms creating an odd mix of shapes and colors. Some floated in special atmosphere bubbles. Others stood on multiple legs, and a few hung from the ceiling like living chandeliers. High Arbiter Kethvar called the meeting to order with a deep rumbling sound that translated through every species communication device. His 4 eyes scanned the assembled representatives as holographic displays filled the air around them. We gather today because of a threat, Kethvar announced. A threat that has been growing for 6,000 of their planetary rotations. The hologram showed a small blue planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. It looked peaceful and quiet from this distance, with white clouds swirling over green and brown land masses. This is Sol 3, HFY continued, home to a species that calls themselves humans. A ripple of nervous energy passed through the assembled aliens. They had all heard whispers about this distant world, but few had paid it much attention until now. 6,000 years ago, we first detected them. The High Arbiter explained. They were primitive then, living in caves, using simple tools, fighting with sticks and stones. We classified them as non-threatening and moved on to more important matters. The hologram changed to show ancient human settlements. Small groups of humans gathered around fires, creating basic shelters and hunting wild animals. They looked harmless enough, but we continued to watch, Kethvar said. Standard procedure for any developing species. What we saw next should have alarmed us immediately. The images began to move faster, showing human civilization advancing at an incredible speed. Cities rose from the ground. Humans learned to farm, to build, to create metal tools. They domesticated animals and learned to sail across vast oceans. Look at their timeline, Kethvar pointed to numbers floating beside the images. Most species take 50,000 years to develop basic agriculture. Humans did it in 5,000. Most take 100,000 years to develop metallurgy. Humans managed it in 8,000. The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was indeed unusual development speed, but speed was not our main concern. The High Arbiter continued. It was what they did with their advancement that worried us. Hologram now showed human armies marching across continents, massive battles with thousands of warriors, cities burning and being rebuilt, humans fighting humans with increasing sophistication and deadliness. They never stopped fighting, Kethvar explained. Every advancement in technology was immediately turned into a weapon. Every scientific discovery was used to build better tools of war, while other species use conflict to solve specific problems. Humans seem to use conflict to solve everything. The images showed human wars growing larger and more complex, from simple sword fights to massive battles involving millions of soldiers, from wooden clubs to metal swords to explosive weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Observe their recent history, the High Arbiter said grimly. In just the last century of their existence, they fought 2 planet-wide wars. The Second War ended with weapons that could split atoms and level entire cities. Any rational species would have stopped fighting after developing such terrible Power, the hologram showed the mushroom. Clouds of nuclear explosions, the devastation of bombed cities, and the millions of human casualties from their global conflicts. Instead, Kethvar continued, they used this period of destruction to develop even more sophisticated methods of warfare. They learned to fight in the air, under the water, and eventually in space itself. They turned their entire planet into a military training ground. Now the images showed human space missions, rockets launching from Earth, satellites orbiting the planet, and small spacecraft exploring their solar system. It all looked relatively innocent. 50 years ago, they achieved space flight, the high orbiter announced. 20 years ago, they established permanent stations around their planet. 10 years ago, they sent exploration probes beyond their solar system. The mood in the Great Hall grew tense. Several representatives exchanged worried glances. 3 days ago, Cathvar said with finality, their probes reached the edge of our space. A collective gasp echoed through the hall. The hologram now showed sleek human spacecraft moving through star systems that belonged to the Zahirian collective. The probes were small but clearly advanced, using technology that seemed far beyond what a 6,000-year-old civilization should possess. Our analysis is complete, the high orbiter declared. This species has demonstrated several concerning characteristics. First, they advance technologically at a rate 10 times faster than any other known species. Second, they have never stopped fighting since we began observing them. Third, they turn every piece of technology into a weapon within years of discovering it. He paused to let this information sink in before continuing. Most disturbing of all, they seem to grow stronger through conflict rather than weaker. Every war they fight teaches them new lessons. Every defeat makes them more determined. Every victory makes them more confident. They are not a species that learns from war to avoid future wars. They are a species that learns from war to fight better wars. The hologram showed human recovery after their major conflicts. Cities rebuilt larger and stronger than before. Armies reorganized with better tactics and weapons. Technologies developed during wartime being used to improve civilian life, which in turn supported larger and more capable militaries. The conclusion is obvious, Cathar announced. Humanity is a species born for conquest. They have spent 6,000 years preparing for war, and now they are reaching into our space. If we wait for them to establish themselves among the stars, they will become unstoppable. The representatives looked at each other with growing alarm. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans were not like other species. They were something new and dangerous. I call for a vote, the high arbiter declared, all in favor of immediate action to eliminate the human threat before it can spread beyond their home system. One by one, all 12 representatives raised their appendages, tentacles, or other voting organs. The decision was unanimous. Then it is decided, Kethvar announced with grim satisfaction. We will mobilize our combined fleets immediately. The humans will be given one chance to surrender peacefully. If they refuse, we will demonstrate why the Zephyrian Collective has maintained peace in this galaxy for 100,000 years. The Great Hall filled with the sounds of preparation as representatives began contacting their home worlds. None of them imagined that their careful, logical decision would soon become the source of great amusement to the very species they sought to destroy. Admiral Sarah Chen was enjoying her morning coffee when the communication console on Terra Prima Station began flashing with an incoming priority message. The orbital defense station had been her home for 3 years, and she had grown to love the quiet morning hours when Earth rotated into view below. Admiral called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communication station. "We're receiving a transmission on all frequencies." "It's definitely not human." Chen sat down her coffee mug and walked over to the console. "Put it through, Lieutenant." The main display filled with an image of a tall, four-eyed alien creature standing in what appeared to be a formal chamber. The being spoke in a deep, rumbling voice that the translation software converted into perfect English. "Primitive species of Sol 3, the alien declared, your expansion into civilized space ends here. You have 72 standard time units to surrender your planet and submit to relocation, refuse and face annihilation by forces beyond your comprehension. This is your only warning." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge crew staring at a blank screen. For several seconds nobody moved or spoke. Then Admiral Chen began to laugh. It started as a quiet chuckle but quickly grew into full hearty laughter that echoed through the bridge. Soon Lieutenant Rodriguez was snickering. Then Sergeant Murphy joined in from the tactical station. Within minutes the entire bridge crew was laughing so hard that tears were streaming down their faces. Did they just?" Chen gasped between fits of laughter. "Did they just give us 3 days to surrender?" 3 days, Rodriguez wheezed, "as if we need 3 days to decide whether to fight aliens." Chen wiped her eyes and tried to regain her composure. "Rodriguez, patch this through to Earth Command immediately. Send it to everyone. Military, civilian, government, news networks. Mark it as entertainment value. Maximum." "Yes, ma'am," Rodriguez replied, still grinning widely. Within an hour, the alien ultimatum was the most watched video on every social media platform on Earth. The response was immediate and overwhelming, and not at all what the aliens had probably expected. On Earth, President Martinez was in the middle of a budget meeting when his assistant burst through the door with a tablet computer. "Mr. President," she said breathlessly, "you need to see this. It's gone viral in the last 30 minutes. Martinez took the tablet and watched the alien transmission. His expression shifted from confusion to surprise to barely contained amusement. "They're serious about this?" he asked. "Completely serious, sir. Our xenobiology experts confirm the transmission is genuine alien origin, and they want us to surrender in 3 days, 72 hours. "Yes, sir." Martinez handed back the tablet and shook his head in amazement. "Cancel the budget meeting, call an emergency session of the Global Defense Council, and tell them to bring their sense of humor. They're going to need it." Meanwhile, on social media, humanity was having the time of its collective life. Memes began appearing within minutes of the transmission going public. Pictures of humans pointing at their calendars with captions like, "Aliens, you have 72 hours. Humans, but I'm busy Thursday." Filled the internet. The hashtag Alien War challenge began trending as humans posted increasingly ridiculous videos of themselves preparing for the invasion. One teenager posted a video of himself putting on mismatched socks with the Caption, ready for intergalactic war. Another showed a grandmother sharpening her knitting needles while declaring, "Come at me, space bugs," late night. Television hosts had a field day. On The Tonight Show, the host opened his monologue by saying, "So aliens declared war on Earth today. I guess they didn't get the memo that we're already at war with ourselves about everything, and we're winning the Global Defense Council's emergency session scheduled for the next morning became the most entertaining government meeting in human history. Representatives from every nation gathered virtually, and many were visibly trying not to laugh as they discussed the threat. "Let me get this straight," said the representative from Brazil, reading from her notes. "They've been watching us for 6,000 years, and they just now decided we're dangerous." That's what the transmission indicated, confirmed General Harrison, head of Earth's Unified Military Command. 6,000 years, repeated the German representative. "That means they were watching us when we were still figuring out how to make bronze tools. And they waited until now to be concerned," added the Japanese representative. "What were they doing for the last 6,000 years? Taking really long coffee breaks." The laughter that followed was so loud that several representatives had to mute their microphones. All right, President Martinez called for order. "We need to take this seriously, even if they've made it difficult to do so." General Harrison, "What's our actual military status?" General Harrison cleared his throat and tried to look professional. "Mr. President, I'm pleased to report that Earth's Unified Defense Forces are at full readiness. The Fleet Admiral reports that all combat vessels are operational and crews are eager to entertain our visitors. How long would it take us to mobilize for actual combat?" asked the British Prime Minister. "About 6 minutes, ma'am," Harrison replied. "But we've been ready for something like this for decades. The real question is whether we want to make this easy for them or really show off." More laughter filled the virtual meeting room. "What do you mean by show off?" General Martinez asked. "Well, sir, we could just use our standard defense fleet and wrap this up quickly, but this is humanity's first contact with hostile aliens. It seems like a waste not to make it educational for both sides." Chinese representative leaned forward. "Educational how?" Harrison's grin was visible even through the video connection. "Let's just say that while they've been watching us for 6,000 years, we've been preparing for them for the last 60. Every war game scenario, every tactical exercise, every piece of military technology we've developed has included the possibility of fighting non-human opponents." "You mean we've been planning for this?" asked the Russian representative. "Planning for it, training for it, and honestly getting a little bored waiting for it," Harrison confirmed. "Our pilots have been running alien combat simulations since they were children. Our engineers have been designing anti-alien weapon systems for fun. Our strategists have written thousands of papers on fighting technologically advanced extraterrestrial forces." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "So when they say we have 72 hours to surrender," President Martinez began, "they've given us 72 hours to finish our preparations and make sure everyone has a good seat for the show." Harrison finished. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to send them a response." "What kind of response?" "Polite one. After all, it's not every Day that aliens travel all this way just to visit. The president nodded. Draft. Something appropriate, General, and remember, we want to make a good first impression. An hour later, the aliens received humanity's official response to their declaration of war. It was brief, polite, and broadcast on all the same frequencies they had used for their ultimatum. To our new friends from the Zahirian Collective, thank you for the advanced notice. We appreciate proper etiquette in these matters. We'll have everything ready for your arrival. Looking forward to meeting you in person. Regards, Earth on Terra Prima Station. Admiral Chen finished her second cup of coffee and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien fleets were heading toward Earth, expecting to find a terrified planet ready to surrender. They were going to be very surprised. The Zaffiran war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with all the coordination and precision of a force that had conquered dozens of worlds. 10,000 ships of various sizes arranged themselves in perfect battle formation, their weapons charged and shields raised. High Orbiter Keithvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, expecting to see a panicked planet desperately trying to evacuate or mount some pathetic defense. Instead, his sensors showed something that made no sense at all. Report, he commanded his tactical officer. Sir, we're detecting approximately 800 human vessels arranged in what appears to be a welcoming formation. They're maintaining standard diplomatic spacing and broadcasting greeting signals. Keithar's four eyes narrowed. Welcoming formation. They're supposed to be terrified or surrendering. Are their weapons powered? Yes, sir, fully armed and ready for combat, but they're also broadcasting what our computers identify as dinner menus and entertainment schedules. Before Cathvar could respond to this bewildering information, his communication officer announced an incoming transmission. Sir, we're receiving a message from a vessel identifying itself as the diplomatic immunity. They're requesting permission to approach for formal negotiations. Negotiations. Keithvar was beginning to feel like he had walked into the wrong war. We gave them an ultimatum, not an invitation to negotiate. Yes, sir, but they insist that proper protocol for accepting a declaration of war requires a face-to-face meeting to sign the appropriate documents. 30 minutes later, Cathar found himself in the strangest situation of his long military career. He was sitting in a beautifully decorated conference room aboard a human vessel being served tea and small, delicious pastries by humans in formal diplomatic attire. Ambassador Thompson, a middle-aged human with graying hair and a warm smile, sat across from him, reviewing a stack of documents. Now, then, High Arbiter, if you'll just sign here, an initial there, we can make this declaration of war completely official. Keithvar looked at the papers in confusion. These appear to be sporting event contracts. Exactly, Thompson beamed. We've taken the liberty of converting your invasion into a formal military exercise with proper rules of engagement, much more civilized this way, don't you think? But this is war, not a sporting event. Oh, we know that, Thompson assured him. But humans have found that wars go much more smoothly when everyone agrees on the rules first. For instance, we've scheduled the first engagement for 1400 hours tomorrow. Earth Standard Time will provide live commentary for both fleets, and we've arranged for medical stations to handle Any injuries? Keithvar felt a headache forming between his second and third eyes. You've arranged medical stations for your own injuries. And yours, of course, Thompson replied. Cheerfully, it would be terribly rude not to. We've also prepared cultural exchange programs for any prisoners of war, assuming you're interested in human cuisine and entertainment. Our chefs are particularly excited to cook for alien palates. 2 hours later, Keithvar found himself back on his flagship, having somehow agreed to a civilized war with scheduled battle times, referee ships, and a formal surrender ceremony planned. For the following week, he wasn't entirely sure how it had happened. Sir, his tactical officer reported, the first engagement is scheduled to begin in 1 hour. The humans have requested that we start with a small skirmish between patrol groups to warm up both fleets. Fine, Keithvar growled. Maybe once we start destroying their ships, they'll take this seriously. The first skirmish was unlike anything in Zapirian military history. It began with a polite radio message from the human squadron leader. Good afternoon. Zapirian Patrol Group 7, beautiful day for a space battle, isn't it? Just so you know, we're not taking any of this personally. Hope you feel the same way. The engagement that followed left the aliens completely baffled. Human fighters moved in ways that should have torn their ships apart, performing impossible maneuvers that defied everything the Zahirians knew about physics and engineering. Entire squadrons would disappear from sensors, only to reappear behind enemy lines, attacking with precise surgical strikes, before vanishing again. But the most unsettling thing was the constant radio chatter. Human pilots seemed to be having a casual conversation while fighting for their lives. Nice try on that plasma burst, Zapirian 6, almost got me there. Hey, watch out for that asteroid field. Wouldn't want you to scratch your paint job. Beautiful ship you've got there. Who designed your hull patterns? Very artistic. When the Zafirans finally managed to destroy human fighter, they expected triumphant revenge or desperate retreat from the other humans. Instead, they got congratulations. Good shot. That was a perfect targeting solution. Jenkins owes me 50 credits. I told him you guys were better than your reputation suggested. The destroyed human ship was immediately replaced by a new one that seemed even more advanced than the last, and the new pilot was just as friendly as his predecessor. After 6 hours of the most polite space battle in galactic history, Keithvar called for a ceasefire. His forces had technically won. They had destroyed more human ships than they had lost, but it felt like losing. Every human ship they destroyed seemed to be immediately replaced by 2 more, and the humans acted like the entire battle had been an enjoyable training exercise. Sir, his communication officer reported, the humans are broadcasting their daily battle summary on the main screen. A cheerful human news anchor appeared. Good evening, this is Sarah Kim with Earth Defense Network News. Today's war activities included delightful skirmish with our new alien friends from the Zephyrian Collective. Initial reports indicate excellent sportsmanship from both sides, with particularly impressive tactical displays from the alien fleet. Tomorrow's schedule includes a medium-scale engagement at 800 hours, followed by cultural exchange activities at 1500 hours. The weather in the combat zone is expected to be clear with low Radiation levels, perfect for outdoor space battles. Kefar turned off the transmission and rubbed his aching head. With all four hands, this is not how wars are supposed to work, he muttered. Sir, his tactical advisor approached. Nervously, I've been analyzing the human ship replacements each new vessel shows technological improvements over the one it replaced, and sir, our intelligence suggests that the ships we've been fighting are not actually Earth's main military force. What do you mean? According to their public broadcast, the ships engaging us are from something called the local patrol group. Apparently Earth's actual defense fleet has been observing our battles for training purposes. Kefar stared at his advisor in horror. Are you telling me that we've been fighting their equivalent of traffic police? That appears to be the case, sir. For the first time in his long military career, High Arbiter Kefar began to wonder if the Zahirian collective had made a terrible mistake. These humans weren't behaving like any enemy he had ever encountered. They were polite, organized, apparently endless their numbers, and seemed to be treating the entire invasion as some sort of elaborate welcome party. Worst of all, they were clearly not taking the Zahirian collective seriously as a threat, and Kefar was beginning to understand why. After 3 days of the most confusing warfare in galactic history, High Orbiter Kefar demanded an emergency meeting with human leadership. He transported to the human flagship with a full honor guard, expecting to negotiate surrender terms with a beaten enemy. Instead, he found himself in an elegant conference room where Ambassador Thompson was serving coffee and displaying holographic charts like they were discussing a business merger rather than a military conquest. High Arbiter, wonderful to see you again. Thompson greeted him warmly. How are you enjoying our little war so far? I hope your crews are getting valuable training experience. Kefar's patience finally snapped. Enough, he roared, his 4 eyes blazing with frustration. Your species is impossible. We came here to conquer you, and you've turned our invasion into some sort of social event. Your forces should have been obliterated days ago. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. I can see how this might be confusing for you. Please sit down. Let me explain what's really happening here. Despite his anger, Kefar found himself taking a seat. Something in the human's calm demeanor suggested that he was about to learn something important. You said your people have been watching us for 6,000 years, Thompson began, activating a holographic display. That's quite a long time from a human perspective, but I'm afraid you may have misunderstood what you were observing. The hologram showed Earth's timeline, but now with additional information that the aliens had not included in their own analysis. 6,000 years ago, when you first detected us, humanity was indeed primitive by galactic standards, but we weren't at the beginning of our development. We were already several thousand years into it. Those cave dwellers you saw were the survivors of an ice age that had wiped out previous civilizations. Kefar leaned forward, suddenly interested despite himself. You see, humanity has been dealing with existential threats for much longer than 6,000 years. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, asteroid impacts. Our planet has tried to kill us dozens of times. Each extinction level event taught us the same lesson: adapt or die. The hologram showed human civilizations rising and falling, each time rebuilding faster and stronger than before. Those wars you observed weren't random. Violence, Thompson continued, they were training exercises. Every conflict taught us new lessons about strategy, logistics, technology, and survival. What you saw as primitive warfare was actually humanity's longest running military academy. The display shifted to show human technological development, but now with a new perspective. Each invention wasn't just a tool, it was a potential weapon, a defensive measure, or a survival technology. When we learned to farm, we also learned to feed armies. When we learned to build cities, we also learned to fortify them. When we learned to make steel, we immediately turned it into weapons. You thought we were a species obsessed with war, but actually we were a species obsessed with survival. Keithvar felt a cold realization creeping over him. You mean every single advancement in human history was made with one question in mind? Thompson confirmed. How does this help us survive the next threat? And for the last 60 years, that threat has been the possibility of hostile alien contact. The hologram now showed human space development, but from an entirely different angle than the Zahirians had considered. When we achieved space flight, we didn't just explore our solar system for scientific knowledge, we built it into a fortress. Every space station, every mining colony, every research outpost was designed with defensive capabilities. We turned our entire solar system into a military installation disguised as civilian infrastructure. Thompson gestured to the data flowing across the holographic display. Those exploration probes that triggered your invasion, they weren't random exploration missions, they were specifically designed to make contact with galactic civilizations. We wanted to meet our neighbors, but why? Keith demanded. If you expected us to be hostile, why reveal yourselves? Thompson smiled. Because isolation is death for a species like humanity. We learned that lesson from our own history. Every civilization that tried to hide from threats eventually fell to them. The only way to survive is to meet threats head-on, learn from them, and turn them into advantages. The High Arbiter's tactical mind was beginning to grasp the implications. You wanted us to attack you, we wanted to know what we were dealing with. Thompson corrected. Your response told us everything we needed to know about galactic politics, military doctrine, and threat assessment capabilities. Frankly, we're a bit disappointed. We were hoping for more of a challenge. Cathar stood up abruptly, his four hands clenched into fists. Impossible. We have 10,000 ships. We represent 12 advanced civilizations. We have been space faring for millions of years, and in those millions of years, Thompson replied calmly, how many existential wars have you fought? How many times has your entire civilization been threatened with complete extinction? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Keithvar knew the answer. The Zephyrian collective had enjoyed peace and stability for hundreds of thousands of years. They had no experience with total war, with fighting for their very existence. You said we've been fighting for 6,000 years, Thompson continued, but that's just the period you observed. Humans have been fighting extinction for over 100,000 years. Every generation of humans has been born into a world where survival was never guaranteed. The hologram shifted again, showing human military capabilities that had never been displayed during the recent battles. The ships you've been fighting represent about 1% of Earth's actual defensive capabilities, Thompson explained. Casually, we've been holding back because we wanted to assess your technology and tactics without revealing our own. New images appeared showing massive space installations hidden throughout the solar system, fleets of advanced warships in stealth formation, and weapon systems that made the Zafran technology look primitive by comparison. But the real shock for you should be this, Thompson said, highlighting another section of data. Earth isn't just defended by humans anymore. Keithvar stared at the display in growing horror. The data showed dozens of other species, all allied with humanity, all contributing to Earth's defenses. You see, while you spent millions of years maintaining the status quo, humans spent 60 years doing what we do best, making friends. Every species we've encountered has been offered the same choice: join our confederation as equals or simply trade and cooperate as neighbor. So far, every species has chosen cooperation. The implications crashed over KTHVAR. Like a tidal wave, the primitive species they had come to eliminate wasn't just technologically advanced, it was the center of an interstellar alliance that the Zahirian collective didn't even know existed. How many species? He whispered. 47, Thompson answered cheerfully. All voluntary members, all contributing their unique technologies and perspectives to our collective defense. All of them quite upset that you declared war on us without even trying to communicate first. Keithvar sank back into his chair, overwhelmed by the revelation. The Zahirian collective had thought they were eliminating a primitive threat. Instead, they had attacked the capital of an advanced confederation that had been preparing for exactly this scenario for decades. The saddest part, Thompson added gently, is that this whole conflict was completely unnecessary. If you had simply sent a diplomatic mission instead of a war fleet, we would have welcomed you with open arms. We've been hoping to meet older civilizations like yours. We have so much we could learn from each other. For the first time in his life, High Arbiter Kethvar realized that he had made a catastrophic error in judgment. The Zahirian collective wasn't fighting a primitive enemy, they were fighting the most experienced warriors in the galaxy, supported by technologies they couldn't understand, backed by allies they hadn't known existed, and, worst of all, these warriors would have preferred to be friends. High Arbiter Keithvar returned to his flagship in a state of shock that his crew had never seen before. His four eyes stared blankly at the tactical displays showing the human fleet, but now those innocent-looking ships seemed like sleeping giants rather than primitive vessels. Sir, his communication officer reported nervously, the human Admiral Chen is requesting permission to board for a final negotiation meeting. Keithvar almost laughed. After everything he had learned, the humans were still being polite. Grant permission and prepare a proper honor guard. I believe we owe them that much respect. Admiral Chen arrived with a small delegation and a collection of data tablets. She was a surprisingly small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, not at all what Kethvar had expected from humanity's military leader. High Arbiter, she greeted him with a formal bow. Thank you for accepting our request. I hope Ambassador Thompson's briefing was educational Educational, Keithvar repeated bitterly. That's one way to describe learning that everything you believed about the universe was wrong. Chen nodded. Sympathetically. I understand the feeling. Humans experience it quite regularly. It's part of how we stay adaptable. She activated one of her tablets, displaying a three-dimensional map of local space. I wanted to show you the real situation before we discuss terms. You deserve to understand exactly what you're dealing with. The map showed the Zephyrian fleet as red dots surrounded by thousands of blue dots that represented human and allied vessels. The aliens were completely surrounded by a force 10 times larger than their own, hidden by stealth technology that the Zephyrians couldn't detect. The ships you've been fighting belong to the Sol System Patrol, Chen explained. They're our local police force. Essentially, our actual military hasn't participated in this conflict yet. Keithvar stared at the display in dismay. Your police force defeated our military. Scouts, I'm afraid so, but don't feel too bad about it. Our police force has been training specifically for alien contact scenarios for 30 years. They're quite good at their job. Chen highlighted another section of the map. This is our rapid response fleet. They've been stationed here since your ships were first detected entering our space, and this, she indicated, a massive cluster of dots, is our home defense force. They're currently powered down to avoid alarming your sensors, but they can be combat ready in approximately 4 minutes. The scope of humanity's military preparation was staggering. Keithvar realized that the Zephyrian collective had walked into the most sophisticated defensive trap in galactic history. But the most important thing I want to show you, Chen continued, is this. The map expanded to show dozens of star systems all connected by lines, indicating communication networks and trade routes. Each system was defended by mixed fleets of various alien species working together. This is the Terran Confederation, Chen announced. 47 species, including humanity, working together for mutual defense and prosperity. Every one of these species was contacted through diplomatic missions, not invasion fleets. Keithvar looked up from the display. You're saying we could have simply asked to join this confederation? You could have asked for anything, Chen replied. Trade agreements, technological exchange, cultural programs, military cooperation, anything except what you actually did, which was threaten to exterminate us without even trying to communicate first, Chen said simply. That was the one approach guaranteed to trigger our defensive protocols. High Arbiter felt the weight of his species' mistake pressing down on him. The Zephyrian collective had managed to choose the only possible course of action that would turn humanity from potential allies into active enemies. What happens now? He asked quietly. Chen consulted another tablet. That depends entirely on you. We've prepared several options. She displayed a list of possibilities on the main screen. Option 1, you surrender unconditionally, and we escort your fleet to designated holding areas while we negotiate with your government. Option 2, you attempt to continue this war, and we demonstrate why 47 species chose to ally with humanity rather than fight us. Option 3, she paused, and for the first time since boarding his ship, Chen smiled. Option 3, you accept that this entire conflict was a misunderstanding based on incomplete information, and we start over with Proper diplomatic protocols. Kethar blinked in surprise. Start over. Of course humans are naturally optimistic. We prefer to assume that intelligent species make mistakes rather than assuming they're inherently evil. Your collective made a strategic error based on 6,000 years of incomplete data. That's understandable. Chen activated another display showing detailed analyses of Zapirian technology, culture, and military doctrine. We've learned quite a bit about your people during this conflict, she explained. Your ships show remarkable engineering. Your crew coordination is excellent. Your tactical doctrine is sophisticated, if somewhat outdated. These are all signs of a mature, intelligent civilization. But you defeated us easily. We had advantages you couldn't have anticipated, Chen admitted. 60 years of preparation, superior numbers, advanced technology, and most importantly, experience with total warfare. But those same advantages could be shared rather than used against you. Cathar found himself considering possibilities he would never have imagined a week ago. You would share your military technology. With us, we share everything with our allies, Chen replied. Technology, resources, knowledge, protection. The only requirement is that member species commit to peaceful resolution of conflicts and mutual defense against external threats. What about the Zephyrian collective? Other worlds, you couldn't possibly extend protection to 12 different species across dozens of star systems. Chen's smile widened. High Orbiter, I think you still don't understand what you're dealing with. Show him. Lieutenant, the display changed to show the true scope of the Terran Confederation's reach. Defense fleets stationed in hundreds of star systems. Communication networks spanning thousands of light years and trade routes connecting civilizations across entire galactic sectors. The Confederation isn't based on Earth. Chen explained. It's based on the principle that intelligent species are stronger together than apart. We've been building this network for 60 years, preparing for the day when we would meet older galactic civilizations. You've been preparing to meet us. We've been preparing to meet someone like you. Yes, advanced species with established territories and sophisticated technology. We always hoped that first contact would be peaceful, but we prepared for the possibility that it wouldn't be. Kevar looked around his bridge, seeing his crew listening intently to the conversation. They all understood the implications. The Zephyrian collective could continue this war and face certain defeat, or they could accept humanity's offer and gain access to technologies and alliances beyond their wildest dreams. If we agreed to join this confederation, he asked carefully, what would be required of us? The same thing required of everyone, Chen replied. Peaceful coexistence, mutual defense, and contribution to the collective good. According to your abilities, in your case, your experience with large-scale fleet operations would be incredibly valuable. We've been looking for partners who could help us improve our coordination across multiple star systems. The offer was more generous than any defeated enemy had a right to expect, and Cathar was beginning to understand that this generosity wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Humans had built their confederation by turning enemies into allies, and they were offering the same opportunity to the Zephyrians. I would need to consult with the other members of our collective, he said. Finally, Of course Chen agreed, take all the time you need. In the meantime, we'd be honored to host diplomatic missions from your various worlds. We're particularly interested in learning about your historical achievements and cultural developments. 3 hours later, Cathar found himself signing a formal ceasefire agreement, the same conference room where this bizarre war had begun. Ambassador Thompson was there again, still serving tea and pastries, still treating the entire situation like a social gathering, rather than a military negotiation. You know, Thompson said as Keithvar signed the final document, this worked out exactly as we hoped it would. Keithvar looked up sharply. You planned this, not the war itself, Thompson clarified. But we knew that any first contact scenario would probably involve some kind of conflict. Humans have never met a problem we couldn't solve by either befriending it or defeating it. Usually, befriending works better, but sometimes you have to prove you can fight before other species take your friendship offers seriously. The High Arbiter sat down his stylus and stared at the human diplomat. Are you telling me that this entire war was a job interview? Thompson's grin was answer enough. 6 months later, the Zirian Collective officially joined the Terran Confederation as its 48th member. Species High Arbiter Keithvar now serving as coordinator of fleet operations for the Confederation's outer rim territories. Often looked back on the events that had led to this alliance. Humans, he had learned, approached everything, even war, as an opportunity to make friends. It was perhaps the most terrifying and wonderful thing about them, and in the end, their amusement at the Zephyrian declaration of war had been completely justified. After all, you can't threaten someone with war when they've been preparing for exactly that conversation for 6,000 years and hoping it would end with everyone sitting down for tea and becoming allies. Humans, Cathar reflected, were definitely the strangest species in the galaxy, but they were also the best friends anyone could ask